WNN Pompano Beach, and 95.3 FM, W237BD Boca Raton, the Health and Wealth Radio Network.
You're pregnant. How far?
1 month, 2, no doctor yet. I can't afford it.
Protect yourself and your baby. The health department can help you out. Test for STDs.
I don't have diseases.
You don't know. You don't always have symptoms. STDs make you and your baby sick.
I don't want my baby sick.
No one cares more about your baby than you.
I'm calling my county health department.
A message from the Florida Department of Health, the Florida Association of Broadcasters, and this radio station.
The opinions expressed on the following sponsored program are strictly those of the host, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors.
It's Monday night at 9 p.m. and time for Sex Talk with the Siegel brothers. Dr. Ricky Siegel is a certified sex therapist, educator, and supervisor, and his brother Larry Siegel is a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator. The Siegel brothers are here to answer all your questions about sex and sexuality, but we're unsure who to ask, including questions you didn't even know you had. They will also welcome guests from around the globe to talk about a wide variety of topics and issues within the fascinating world of sexuality. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to Sex Talk.
Good evening, and welcome to Sex Talk with the Siegel brothers. I'm Ricky Siegel, certified sex therapist.
And I'm Larry Siegel, a sexuality educator and clinical sexologist.
And my super cool big brother.
Oh, thanks. Love to be.
Thank you for doing this with me all this time as we start a new year. Happy New Year to everybody. If you're joining us on the radio in South Florida, we're on 95.3 FM and 1470 AM. Or if you're watching live on Facebook, hello, thank you for joining us. Please hit that like and share button. Or you can watch the previous shows on YouTube. And exciting time of the year. It's a new semester.
Yeah, everyone's kind of back to work now, back to school.
And back to sex ed.
Hangovers are gone. Hopefully people are recovering from, or recovered from their holidays.
Yes.
And New Year's and all that kind of stuff. We survived another one. Sort of my way of looking at the New Year.
Small doses of cold weather and then back to Florida.
Yes.
That's the holidays for me.
There you go.
Small doses.
Yeah, you had enough of a little winter up there.
Yeah.
So, good. Better you than me.
Yeah.
So what's new and exciting?
Started the new semester tonight. Talking about sex. For college students at Palm Beach State College.
Yeah. We both teach sexuality courses there.
And it still strikes me crazy. How many years now? Since, 96 formally?
Something like that.
And no one else has ever taught the class on any other campus. I think once. Someone in Palm Beach Gardens.
Yes.
And then that was it.
That was
One semester
right.
and done.
Just can't do it.
How is it not on the radar that sex and drugs are relevant to college students' lives and that maybe they should be mandatory?
Well, it's kind of funny that you're saying this now because it happened to be this afternoon that I was actually talking to somebody in the registrar or academic advising to try to find out what we can do because I was validated. This is what really the point that I want to share. I was validated in my suspicion that one of the reasons why academic advisement doesn't really direct people into certain kind of classes, like the sexuality and the drug classes, is because they don't know what it is and they're afraid of it.
Oh, my goodness.
I mean, you have a lot of these people that are in these positions that are coming from very conservative backgrounds.
But students are taking, I assume, some in health professions and some in maybe pre-med, nursing. There's a nursing
how long have we been
program
dealing
now.
with this trope that even in health classes, they do a unit, no pun intended, on birth control and STIs, play a little lip service to, and this thing about healthy relationships, but that's it.
No, one of my students last semester was taking anatomy and physiology, and she showed me her book, and there is no mention of the clitoris in female sexual anatomy. In an anatomy and physiology course, I guess the authors don't have those parts or didn't know about them, didn't know they were important enough to include.
Didn't need to study them. if you got one, you'll find it. If you don't have one, maybe you'll find one. But
this is
it's
stuff
just
that
not gonna
goes
happen.
back to the 80s and the 70s.
Oh, and beyond, yeah.
Well, the 60s when Masters and Johnson published their findings. For the first time in medicine, people studied what human bodies do during sexual response. Right? And then in the 80s, it seemed clitoris has disappeared again. Remember that Australian urogynecologist? Helen O'Connell was her name.
Is that the conspiracy of the clitoris?
Well, she noticed that it was lacking in her surgical anatomy texts. And she was one of the first ones to talk about more than just the little man in the boat.
Right.
But that was, and then where did it go? In the 90s.
Well, then there was also, remember, there was a period of time where the clitoris was sort of neglected and all focus was on G-spot.
Right. Yes, we happen to know the authors, the legendary, pioneering Beverly Whipple.
Yes.
And
yes. Wonderful,
equally
wonderful
pioneering
lady.
physical therapist, John
Perry.
Perry.
Yeah, who doesn't get the credit he deserves. He really doesn't.
Who the two of them wrote the book, The G-Spot, in 1985?
Yeah, I mean, literally wrote the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the debates raged on since then. What exactly?
But the debates changed.
What exactly is being stimulated?
Right. So the debate is no longer, does it exist?
Right.
But whether or not it's actually a standalone kind of organelle, is it just really sort of like
There's nothing in the
referred
vagina.
stimulation?
That's probably, yeah. Remember, the clitoris has legs.
Right.
And they straddle the vagina. So anything that's being pushed up and inside is likely to
putting
be
pressure on
the
those
underside.
those roots, or those legs, I like that, of the clitoris. So, but where is all of the professional discussion? Where are we looking at, this is what it is, how do we maximize pleasure? Because see, this is another thing too. Even when there is acknowledgement of physical structure and even acknowledgement to some degree of function,
we can't acknowledge
pleasure
that it feels
is
good.
never really considered a function.
Yeah.
Yet that's kind of ironic when we're talking about the clitoris. Because what is the physiological function of a clitoris?
Only function.
That's it.
Why do people get upset at that? Like we made it up.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like this show getting called porn by Facebook. Really? Couple of dudes
exactly.
with this guy making sure we don't cross any FCC lines.
This
is porn? Wow, I could think of a few things unsexier.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there's always been this sort of duality within our culture, our society. Certainly, it's always been a battle between sexual repression and sexual health. But I think we're sort of full bore. I mean, I think we're even digging in a little bit deeper than we were before. This kind of sexual conservative, the sexual reactionism, if you will, versus the sexual health, the sexual just celebration, looking at this as an integral, important, and wonderful part of our life. We're still it's amazing that here we are. We just turned the page on a calendar again, 2019, and we're still debating things like sexual pleasure and birth control and any of these kinds of issues that have still, after all of these years, not even been close to getting resolved.
How quickly people have forgotten that Bill Clinton fired Joycelyn Elders for answering a question about whether or not young people should be taught about masturbation.
And in particular, high school students.
Especially as an alternative to intercourse
and
pregnancy and disease transmission.
Teaching them to derive and discover pleasure in their own body as alternatives to
intercourse. The fact that she had the
intercourse.
audacity to be as racy and out there as Dear Abby and Ann Landers and say the same thing that they said in the 70s.
Right.
And he was forced to fire her over that.
Yeah.
Even more ironic.
Kind of ironic that it's Bill Clinton.
Since it was, we know what happened during his second term.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Right.
So, again, we've said this before. Doesn't bring us any pleasure. As long as we're in this country, we'll probably never be out of a job. And it's even more, I think, sad. saddening, whatever the word would be, considering the fact that we really shouldn't have these jobs to begin with.
Yeah, no, that's the craziest. That in a perfect world, we should be embarrassed that we have a need for sexuality educators, because that's what parents are.
Well, sure. And it should be, I mean, we should be seeing healthy descriptions and expressions of sexuality all around us.
And we don't.
Yeah. Right. So we're not going to should all over ourselves, and looking at a world that we wish could be, and just have to deal with what is actually. And this is what we have to deal with.
But you can look back and see that because it's really short history. I was talking about this in class tonight. Any other field of medicine or psychology, you can have centuries of history to read about. This is still kind of a brand new science, right? So we're still just learning about a lot of this stuff. Masters and Johnson's work was in the 60s.
Right.
We were already born, and people were first bothering to look at what bodies do.
Yeah, that's thank you for that perspective. It's well within our lifetime that we first had a glimpse into the scientific, medical aspects of sexuality.
And contraception and abortion were illegal in our lifetime. And sex ed didn't really happen if not for folks like Saul Gordon. And, the field just lost another pioneer.
Oh, yes.
Peggy Brick.
Yes.
Dedicate tonight's show to Peggy.
Yes, Peggy.
We wouldn't have been able to do what we've done without people sticking their necks out like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think every educator owes a nod to both Peggy and Saul. And even people who have never heard of Saul Gordon don't realize it, but their stuff is based on his work.
Yeah. And the fact that parents can talk to their kids about sex. Like, oh my, how did the parents have those kids? But, then looking back at like the big generational shift from the so-called baby boomers to the hippies. Right? Well, no, I guess most of the hippies
most
were
hippies are baby boomers.
I mean, they're parents, right? And supposedly from a Leave It to Beaver kind of Ozzie and Harriet world to a post All in the Family world.
Yeah.
But in our work in sex ed over, about 30 years?
Yeah. 30 years or so.
We haven't seen improvement. We've seen a lot of hippies' kids in our classrooms and realized once the hippies got to be 30-somethings or 40-somethings, they didn't want to talk to their kids about sex.
Well, no, I mean, a lot of them went into the finance industry and kind of became everything that they were fighting against in their youth.
Hippies, right. Remember there was that workshop we did a long time ago? How do we teach them to say no in the 90s when all we did was say yes in the 70s?
Yep. Yeah, we need to bring that back.
Well, times change a lot.
Well, there's definitely different things, sure.
Got a lot more uptight.
Yeah.
And now, of course, we see it's research we've been talking about for a few months now that less and less people seem to be reporting sexual activity.
Absolutely.
Both in marriages and among young people.
Right. And I would say especially among young people. We hear
they're supposed to be having more sex than anybody.
Exactly. And it seems not necessarily the case. Right? So, this some new papers and new studies that were coming out recently starting to hear the word sexual recession. People, again, just not having the amount of sex that at least they were saying they had before. Right? Now, this is also, I think, one of these points that we take for granted. What is the proper amount of sex for people to have? What is the, quote, normal amount? And is there such a thing as typical? Does that really matter?
I forgot where I heard this, but I think there is an answer to the question of what most people think everybody else is doing.
Okay.
Right? Most people think everybody else is having sex 2-3 times a week. But in reality, it's probably closer to once every week or two.
Right, exactly.
So everybody automatically thinks they're having less sex than everybody else.
Right. And here is what has not changed in the field and all these things that we've been talking about throughout history, myths and misconceptions. Right? And probably on a level that we never see in any other area.
Yeah, they get worse instead of better.
Yeah, they really do. And what amazes me is how persistent some of these are. Right? When we look at, I think, a lot of what I call dangerous myths, right? Some myths, they're kind of silly. They're funny and all that.
Like the pregnancy ones.
Well, I think myths that are relate to things like pregnancy, contraception, and rape. And looking at, I read something recently too that not only are myths about rape dangerous, but when we look at all the euphemisms we have about it as a way of distancing ourselves, making it sort of kind of a little bit okay. The fact that it's okay for judges to ban the use of the word rape in a rape trial.
Why? Because it would
it's inflammatory.
Taint a jury against the rapist?
Yes.
So what?
It's inflammatory. It can be biased. So they'll again, sexual assault. Euphemistically, they'll refer to it, forcing himself on her, having his way with her, that kind of thing.
It's like the 1940s crap we were talking about last week.
Right.
Having his way with her.
Yeah.
Who
So
talks
again,
like that?
These things persist. Right? Now, when we look at some of these myths that people have, too, that whatever a woman chooses to leave the house wearing...
Somehow she's responsible for guys' responses to...
well, hey, if you didn't want to get raped, you shouldn't have left the house showing cleavage.
Oh, God.
Really? A little blaming the victim kind of thing. That's persistent, right? The fact that the woman agreed to do things before. We hear this all the time from guys. Well, wait a minute, it can't be rape because we were already making out.
Yeah. Or we've had sex in the past.
And we've had sex in the past. Again, there's a whole boatload of those myths that kind of occur together. And similarly, there's danger in those pregnancy myths. That there's still so many girls
the Florida
that don't
ones
know.
Who think that the girls who think that the chlorine in the swimming pool will work as birth control.
Right, or the chlorine and the bubbles in the hot tub. Right? Still sitting in a bathtub with vinegar or Coca-Cola. Girls still believe this kind of stuff. Can't get pregnant the first time. Can't get pregnant if you're standing up. I mean, these things
jump
are
up and
persistent.
down after. And
Yes.
Shake the
things that
little
we
buggers
laughed
out.
about 30 years ago are still sort of front and center for a lot of people. So again, we're not doing a very good job. If we're not even doing sex ed, how about give good information?
Well,
we've railed before about how so few states would even require medical accuracy.
But it's also related to the last point, that if there is any sex ed, it's so focused on horrible consequences that nobody's talking about pleasure as something that people are allowed to take away from education about their sexuality.
Right. And and a lot of people that are doing this work, a lot of people that are doing real sex ed, and a lot of people that are doing whatever they're calling sex ed, are also complicit. When we hear especially adolescent guys complain about condoms, right? And this, I'm going to put this out there as a big old myth. Condoms ruin sex. I love when a guy says, "Well, I can't feel anything with a condom." It's like, well, then you're either dead or you have no
need
penis.
To see a neurologist.
Absolutely, I'll give you a referral. I mean, let's get realistic about what we're talking about here. If they're done right, first of all, there's a fit issue. Right? There was also, I'm sure you read this study as well, came out that guys that have a really high rate of dissatisfaction with condoms, when they actually find one that fits right, it's all of a sudden the greatest thing in the world.
Right. There was something, who was talking about this, that guy's first purchase is magnums.
Yeah.
It's like, really... Don't oversell it, fella.
Well, but that's that classic, for a guy, that's 6 inches.
Yeah.
Right? So this idea of condoms ruining the mood, it's not spontaneous. Whenever I hear that, I think of Marissa Tomei in My Cousin Vinny. Spontaneous. A burp is spontaneous. Right?
There's no guy that's going to have the mood ruined if his partner's putting a condom on him.
That's the thing. Those
safe sex can be eroticized and
those
made
four
hot and
little
sexy.
words, right, can completely change the game. Let me do it. Right? And you're right. Now it's not wearing condoms. It's sex play.
Right. Because the former is guys getting this message that everything has to stop and he has to start fumbling around, and maybe for a lot of guys that's the first time he's ever using it when he's about to have intercourse for the first time. And so it is an interruption and maybe ruin the mood. And maybe if he's so panic-stricken about doing it right, that's why he's losing his erection.
And herein lies a big part of the problem. Why is it that so many people's first time is filled with panic, is so stressful? How come it can't be fun?
That's right. They don't get the message that it's supposed to be fun. No, you don't have time for
can
awkward.
Actually be a part of the
fun.
fun.
You have to be a born lover. Otherwise, you're a loser.
Well, that's
even if it's something you've never done before, you have to be great at it.
Right. Well, again,
how much sense does that make?
We've gotten this early on, especially in our careers. I remember how many times going to, especially sort of like residential centers and things with runaway boys and how many guys came up. And it was one of those looking around, make sure nobody sees them talking to me. Just to thank me for actually demonstrating how to put on a condom, because they really didn't know, and they can't say. They can't admit that they don't know.
I got yelled at the Red Cross. They told me, please don't take the condom off the packet, because I had everybody, first of all, they stapled right through it to make it useless.
Nice.
Right? And I had everybody take it off their packet and open it and unroll it, and somebody got offended. So you're coming here for a class on HIV 104, and you're offended that I made you touch a condom?
Yep. Right. Now, again, obviously...
That was the last time I taught for the Red Cross.
And it's a good lesson in there, too. Right? We talk about what is the most effective method of contraception. Basically, whichever one people are willing and able to use consistently and correctly.
Right.
If it involves something that you're not comfortable doing, choose a different method because you're not going to do it. So, obviously, this is somebody that probably cannot use condoms. They can't touch them. Can you imagine? First of all, I see I have to go off in this direction.
Why would they be in that class in the first place? Right?
Well, I mean, if they can't touch a condom, what kind of sexual life must they have?
And they're going to counsel others?
They're
going to counsel others about their sex life?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now we look at the projection that is also rife in this field.
And that's what adolescent sexuality is about. Yes. You can't do it because it makes me uncomfortable.
That's right. That's right.
That's why
that whole field.
Sex ed hasn't gotten any better.
Yeah, and that really is a big part of it.
We're still in denial that adolescents are sexually mature and entitled to experience pleasure from their bodies.
And let me add that too, because I kind of sort of went around myself and forgot the point that I was going to make earlier. But this idea of contributing to the notion that condoms take away. Even a lot of well-meaning sex educators will say, well, yeah, but it's better than the alternative, which is no. It's got to be completely turned around.
Slipperier, sloppier, wetter is better. I always tell people copious amounts of lube.
Absolutely.
Bring in drop cloths if you have to.
There you go.
Right.
Make a mess.
Yes.
Stop trying to be. It's like consider sex like eating watermelon. Right?
You're not
going to stay clean. Especially if you do it right. Ribs, watermelon, and sex. You got to get dirty.
Nice.
So what are some other myths that still persist
there's so
when
many.
it comes to sex?
There's so many that men are ready instantly and women need all this revving up.
Yeah.
Right? So that foreplay is implied for a heterosexist desire to get women primed because guys are ready anyway.
Right. And for a lot of heterosexual guys, then that becomes, because, quote, foreplay, which I can't stand anyway.
Yeah.
But this idea of foreplay just becomes perfunctory. And it's sort of like
I
a little
gotta
squeeze, a little nip, a little
TV
pinch.
repairman,
Looking at my watch.
right?
You ready yet? No?
I got to play TV repairman and work the knob, see if something happens until I can get my chance. Yeah.
Right.
There's no script except the crazy ones, the unwritten scripts that get handed down.
Right. And those are powerful scripts.
I mean, guys we've talked about this before, guys have no idea what really gets women off, so even when it comes to using hands or mouths or tongues, they're just using them like substitute penises and just thrusting.
Yeah.
It's always about the thrusting.
Right.
Nobody knows what there should be exploring down there.
Right, absolutely. And I mean, even with a kiss. I mean, I said this in some article in, I think, Elite, daily.com something, or I think a British
You were just
site.
in Sexual Health I saw this
The
week.
Sexual Health Magazine.
Yes,
sexualhealthmagazine.com.
look at you.
But, when it comes to kissing and it comes to using your fingers and things like that, and I would say to a great degree even the penis, but for all, here's a message, here's a first 2019 bit of advice for guys. If it's not a penis, it shouldn't be thrusting. Right? It should be dancing. It should be
Nice.
exploring.
I like
it should
that.
be it should be doing all kinds of things. But if it's not a penis, don't thrust it.
And if it is, it's a sex toy that guys should be a little more curious about using in other ways, and besides rushing to thrust.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's so many kinds of movements.
Sure.
There's so many ways to touch another body. It's amazing how limited people are.
Yeah, remember we used to do this on the blackboard, just list body parts and connect with arrows, and
Yeah.
this can be in contact with that, and this with that, and defining that question, what is sex?
There are very few body parts that can't connect with other body parts.
Yeah.
Right? Some you may not want to. I don't know if I'd connect an eye with an anus, but
No.
I think that may be a line that we can legitimately draw.
I think, is that where pink eye comes from? Yikes. Yeah.
Oh, my. It kind of gives it a whole nother meaning. Right? And now that myth about the sort of different sort of sexual levels also connects to that myth that men usually want sex and women aren't really interested in sex.
Yeah.
And remember, like, from the 40s and 50s, that old...
secondary gain.
Right, exactly. That men will use love to get sex and women will use sex to get love, kind of thing.
Or jewelry or fur coats.
Well, back in a time where they would go to college for, an MRS degree, they would say.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And again, just to be clear, we're not being sexist. These are the
These were the
scripts standards that work.
Yeah, that unfortunately still many are alive and well.
And that really is the unfortunate part.
Yeah.
But, we also see, too, I think it's interesting in this idea that women aren't as interested in men and that men always want and are always ready. When we see, especially, middle-age and longer-term couples coming in for therapy, more often than not, at least in my experience, it's not been the men complaining that the women, in heterosexual couples, that the women don't want to have sex. It's often the women complaining the men don't want to have sex.
That's the big flip.
Yeah.
That low desire in men seems to be like the new epidemic, or something's going on.
Yep.
Lots of things going on. Tell you what, it's not the porn.
No, it is definitely not the porn.
No, there's also research that proves porn doesn't cause ED. Guys who are anxious about porn get ED. And guys who are guilty or have this moral trip about it.
A consistent and common theme. Porn does not have any of those effects. It's people's relationship to porn that causes all the trouble. And the more anxiety-ridden they are and guilt-ridden they are, and should I do this, I shouldn't be doing this, that's what's doing it. It ain't the porn.
Yeah. And on that note, we will thank you for joining us for this week's episode of Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Join us next Monday and every Monday at 9 o'clock.
Right. And send us your ideas for topics and things that we can talk about as well. Love to have them.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Have a great week.
You've been listening to Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Join us every Monday night at 9 p.m. on WNN, 1470 AM and 95.3 FM. Or watch live streaming video at AMP2 TV Productions on Facebook, or look for the shows on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you'll join us again next week.